Yeah, that's one area I wanted to actually open up discussion on this topic, which is, even though, because I had that like tweet that does look sick now, where before the quarterfinals I did say EDG would win Worlds, and I gave all these reasons why. I don't pretend, by the way, that I actually had EDG as the best team at Worlds. Like, I thought Damwon was going to win the Worlds as well, especially after all the matches I saw. Like, quite frankly, I just was basically giving you a reason why someone else could win. And also, like, I thought, you know, like, as you saw in this matchup, like, people always overestimate, especially in League of Legends, that, like, you know, there's never one team is 100% win rate. Like, they're not going to win every time. But I have to say, from watching this final, this is another reason I find it so interesting people didn't dive into the games much. Because I agree with what you said at the end there, Zabatine. I actually think when I watched this final, like, listen, fair play to EDG, you won. It will only ever be played once, and you will be considered the champion. But I think this is one of the worst performances from Damwon I've seen in ages, mate. Like, this looked to me like if I could, like, replay this match, but not like literally they play them in a row. It's like I keep resetting time, like the Edge of Tomorrow or something, and replaying the game. I think Damwon wins this most of the time, mate. I think even this series they almost won. Like, let's get into some of those angles. Like, Nymira, what do you think of this? Because I again, like, fair play that EDG did win, but I don't know that they were the better team.
I think that Game 3 is the one thing which really stands out to me in terms of like Damwon's performance, because I look at that draft against like the Godzilla topside draft from EDG. You've got like Jace, Jinzhao, TF. Like, holy crap, playing through topside is so easy to do and so impactful with that kind of composition. And also, if we're gonna reference Jensen Goh, this one of his reasonings for why EDG might come out on top is because they're really good at playing Jace, Drake stacking, playing around leads coming through from Flandre, and then just kind of snowballing the game into a ridiculous kind of proportion rather, and kind of forcing spread map styles to kind of converge on one lane where they're less good at defending that. But Damwon, actually, between this game and then also the game which kind of got super fired on Jace in the semifinals too, against SKT, T1 rather, they did really, really well at making sure that Jace could never get full value. They couldn't get the real proper Jace setup where you could just poke people out. They have to concede turrets and objectives and all this other stuff. And in this game, I looked at what Damwon achieved with against that ED draft, and I was like, this is a really damn good team. This is something which I don't know if another team could do that, denying Jace so heavily. I think there are some things which Damwon do better than pretty much every team in the world, and then actually I think there are some things they might do better than some teams in history too. I think the way that they denied the Jace in that game in particular really just blew me away.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we've seen, and I think we'll speak about it a little bit more during the video and throughout the series, is the fact that I think that Khan has been a better neutralizing force than he has been a proactive force in this series. And that's the only game where I think the staff, as well as the players, have recognized that. And I feel like the Gragas, which is probably a not resource-heavy champion, but has exactly what it takes to actually impact team fights as well, like neutralize lane against Jace, has been fantastic. And in many other games, he's been tunneling and getting Graves, which he played well on. Hasn't worked because I feel like as we spoke before the tournament, I think Damwon really likes their mid jungle, and they really like to play around their solo lane to enable their jungle, their duo lane to enable their support. Whereas EDG wanted to play to the top side, and they really tried this series to play the top side against EDG, and I feel like they kind of hit. They played tennis against a wall, and they just failed at it. But the only game where they actually completely play towards their mid to bot, and they ignore their top side, actually demolished TDG.
Because the thing is, even though a fan's going to think you're just being salty there because everyone built up Damwon as this unbeatable force, I mean, remember, before the final even began, people were already essentially shadowboxing them against like the great teams in history. Like, right, when they win, will they be better than the T1 teams and the old, like, basically that was almost the terms we were on. But I even think it was justified. Like, they didn't win, certainly. But by the way, even then it was close. But that's the reason why I also feel like Damwon underperformed in this final is they could have lost even harder. Like, the game 3 you're talking about, EDG was leading that game for most of the time. Like, I remember thinking, like, holy fuck, is this how it ends? It just they're 3-1. Like, they don't even get to 5 games in the final. And I have to say, obviously, people will meme on the Khan side of it because he did, in fact, go out in the most Khan fashion possible by not only not winning Worlds in his last ever tournament, but losing fucking game 5. So, what do you think on this? We've got to go into some of the players, of course.
Well, I mean, isn't it funny how Khan is probably going to be remembered more for that accolade because no one is going to reach like that accolade.
Oh, it feels impossible.
Making it. Like we thought that Uzi would be like the best player to not win anything and not win Worlds, and then suddenly like Khan's done it. in the most incredible of fashions. But yeah, and of course, speaking of the game 3, of course, like it was a huge lead coming in from EDG, and Damwon turned around some massive plays from Showmaker, and of course, Showmaker had a very good tournament in general, but then had to come up against Scout, who found champions which didn't necessarily depend on the 1v1 matchup, and particularly those last 2 Zoe games, just came out with just a really good angle to deny Damwon what they really wanted to do, particularly around mid lane priority, because I was kind of thinking about this in the last couple of weeks and thinking, particularly after the game 5 against T1 that Damwon had, I actually wonder if Damwon are the best poke team in history. I genuinely think that when they get themselves the Zoe, when they're playing with a range advantage, they're very coordinated and very cohesive at knowing their safe distances so they're not engaged onto, which is one of the big weaknesses of a poke comp and XYZ. And then for Scout to pick that kind of style against them and run it back into them and have such good Zoe performances, that is very phenomenal on just a story standpoint from it too.
Yeah, it's very interesting that a player such as you want 6 LCK, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like it's unheard of. It's so hard to win LCK. Like winning LCK is the equivalent in soccer or football, depending on where you come from, of winning the Premier League. Yes. It's so hard. Everybody plays so well that you never get to see like the Nongshim, even the Bros or KT. Like these teams, if they were to play in the other leagues, they would actually get games against the top teams quite more often than what people think, because the average level is very, very high. Like you just look at Genji that didn't look well and actually made it to the semis in a pretty decent fashion. So winning 6 LCK is really like an unheard of achievement. But it's like he went to MSI final, went to Worlds final, I think twice. Like it's crazy. And I feel like it's so, as you said, it's so sad that it's going to be remembered to be a choker, where it's like, if you play, I don't know, 15 finals in your life and you win, I don't know, like 6 of them or 7 of them, right? It's like, because I think you won Asian Games or something, it's like you won half. So you're not a choker if you win half of your finals overall in your career, right? Like most players in their life, like Caps is the absolute choker then, right? Is the absolute choker. Went to 2 back-to-back World Final and didn't score a single game. So this narrative, I think, is very, very odd because it's been playing fantastic. Obviously, we see that pressure maybe during the game 5 hit him when he was playing Graves. Like he misplayed like 1 or 2 times, or he tried to overplay a few things. But I feel like overall, he's been one of the best players at Damwon this tournament.
I will say in that game 5 too, I mean, Graves is obviously a very strong champion on the Worlds patch, blah, blah, blah. But the one matchup which I personally never want to see a Graves into, because later into the game, into the team fights, you struggle to find space as Kennen. Like, Graves can't do crap against Kennen. Kennen just ults, you get very little value out of that team fight. And even if you have to like quick draw backwards, you lose so much pressure onto stuff which you need to be holding at bay, stuff like the Aphelios. So as much as there were some like individual misplays, like, you know, missing that ult on the tower with that good Duke coming in from Flandre, that game was kind of with the deck stacked against them, and I would say that was for most of the team on Damwon in that game 5. How do you play Trundle into that composition? We already talked about the Graves into the Kennen. Like, I feel like Damwon pressed the buttons pretty good that game. I felt like individually they did all right. They got that sneak Baron, but for Khan to be remembered as kind of like a choker and for him to have played very badly in the finals, I don't think that's the correct narrative to be following outside of that context, you know, as Sabatine was saying.
Not for this tournament, no. Like, that's the thing. I even said myself, look, I meme on Khan, but like, that player that he was like that was even years ago. Like, he wasn't even like that, quite frankly, when he was on FPX. I think he was a mismatch for the team, but he was even a good player then. And also, he'd already, by this point in time, in fact, you even saw this in SKT, he already wasn't like the, I am a Carrioni champ or top is open player. He wasn't that from years and years ago. Like, that was in the early days. And to be fair, when he played that style, he did have fucking Prayer Gorilla as his bot lane. Probably the best bot lane to ever have if you want to play a hard carry top style, by the way. So, no, I always thought that was overblown anyway. Like, I don't even put it on him that he didn't win this tournament. I will say it does play into what I'm sure is a topic we have to discuss, which is what the fuck was that Damwon Game 5 draft? Because here's an angle I can't handle, Sabatine. Is not only was it a very weird draft for a team that seemed to have the meta just at their fingertips most of the tournament, but even the top lane one is weird to me, mate, because here's the thing, right? Flandre, if anything, through the rest of the tournament, tournament was just a guy whose job was just neutralize the other guy. You don't even have to win the lane necessarily. And he's a guy who played almost half the tournament on fucking Graves in the Graves matchup. So like, if anyone's going to know the other side of it, surely it's him. Like, of all the people, I get the idea of taking the Graves away from him. It's a really good champion, but this didn't feel like the move, dude. Like, what do you think of this draft? Like, to me, remember, in a Game 5 scenario, this is why I used to love back in OGN when they had the blind pick, right? Because what it showed you was the psychology of the team going into the draft, right? You know, because they can't know what the opponent's going to pick, what they really think they're strong on, what they really have to deny, you know. So in this scenario, the same thing. If I'm in Game 5 for the World Championship, in theory, most coaches are probably going to play it safe and draft comfort, right? This looks like they kind of went for some crazy fucking like 500 IQ draft or something.
More than the Graves, like the Grave doesn't like annoy me that much in this game. And if you look, like he had a huge lead in early game. What happened is the mid jungle has never been able to play around the Graves, and wave after wave after wave, scouts as well as the TATA have been able to rotate to the top side and cover the top side. The problem is on the other side, there was no play ability for Ziggs Leona versus Aphelios Rakan. And as far as I'm concerned, Rakan is the best champion in the game when it comes to very important match, because there will be a point where you, like, I think Khan lost as well the final of MSI on a QSS that was timed like 3 seconds, and it was just an all flash from Rakan. And that happens quite a lot. If you look at these champions, Rakan, Kennen, Aphelios, they are Game 5 champion, right? It's like, it's probably a term that no one uses, but they are Game 5 champion, because the level of execution required with the pressure is going to give you a significant edge on how you want to execute your game. Whereas Ziggs Leona, if your Graves not ahead, and the Ziggs can only poke, right? Poke is very strong if you don't have engage, but they have Rakan and Kennen. So they just get the pressure from mid jungle with Zoe Chinjao, and then they just cover the Graves that's like far ahead. And once Graves can't do anything more than farming and can actually survive the early game, because he barely survives, right? It's not even he plays like, he has a great game of Kennen, but he can survive. And then you see Aphelios just exploding everyone in teamfight. Aphelios, Rakan, Kennen, that's all it takes. Like Zoe and Zhao are not relevant after 25 minutes, but it was impossible to play against because, I mean, it's Game 5 of World Chair Final, so you're not going to be able to play perfectly.
Yeah, and I think the big thing about the Aphelios angle is that if you look at Aphelios on his lonesome playing against that comp, that's the one character on that team which doesn't really feel that great about things. Everyone else is hypermobile. Once you get Gale Force, you feel a little better about things, but Trundle Pillar starts to really reduce your impact, Minefield, all this other stuff. But when the cannon is buying up so much space, and though you do have some good range between the Ziggs and the Syndra, it's buying so much pressure that could be put onto your Aphelios instead. Which is why when it got to late game, you saw Viper doing these really slick flash over Syndra stuns and kind of turning the game around at that point. I don't actually think this game was about the Aphelios. It's just having that in the back pocket, as you're saying, in the Game 5 kind of sense of things. And if you tie that into also saying that actually Damwon weren't great about playing around the Graves on the top side, if you start leaving Aphelios to free farm on bot side while you're still trying to haphazardly go towards top, then you're just buying into that own demise once you get to that 3-4 item mark. It just kind of all builds up on each other where you're not executing the advantages which you have drafted towards, and it falls apart afterwards.
Yeah, if you look at the last team fight, it's very interesting.
Yeah,
it's a dragon contest, and EDG has been playing the dragons the same way against Damwon, and I think that's the only one that actually worked on the like positional fights. Like as I mentioned a lot during this whole, I would say, second part of the year, it's like League is not about macro anymore because everybody knows macro. It's much more about using the position advantage you get from the macro and execute the fight the right way according to the lead you got from the macro game. And Damwon had a massive edge on that, and I think EDG understood the team fight. If you look, it's just the Aphelios difference. In this team fight, it's everybody throw their spell pretty much, I would say 80% of their skill shot are hitting, and then Aphelios just runs into, and there is like 3 kills instantly, and people just have to die, and then they lost the game and the war's over. And it's so important to notice that in decisive moments throughout the whole history of League of Legends, ADCs have made the difference. Uzi, Reckless, like, oh, this game is unwinnable, it's Reckless just popping off. You have Perks that did that with his Yasuo in game 5 against T1 2 years ago. it's so important to have a consistent DPS that can actually pop up in team fight. And I feel like that's for me the only biggest mistake of this draft is this draft is not really stress proof from Damwon once again.
Well, the caveat to that is that they do have the range advantage in the Ziggs and the Syndra, but you've done double AP for your range advantage.
Yep.
It's very easy to start drafting towards MR at that point. The Ziggs didn't get a huge amount of work done. I think actually one of the core things about this whole series actually was making sure that Ghost didn't have a very efficient champion to play around for most of it. Game 1 thought was a great example of that too. It's very obvious you're not going to get play comfort. They lock in the Jarvan to stop them play the MF and stuff like that. And kind of to compound the issue by picking it alongside double AP, so you saw what happened as the game went on. They were just tickling the front line, did nothing.
Yep. It was very hard. It was. I think overall the idea of range is really good. And as you said, I think Damwon is one of the best poke team I've seen. Poke is only good if you don't have engage against them. And I feel like it's the only thing they overlooked in this draft is like, oh, but they do have a hard engage in this situation. So what do we have to prevent that? And they just didn't have the tools. So they just ended up. Whereas if you look at game 5 against T1 in the semis, T1 went for the Zillion instead of the Rokan or like the Nautilus or whatsoever engaged champ Leona that was available. And T1 was completely unable to do anything against the range of Damwon, and you felt like T1 was weaker. In this game 5, actually, I feel like EDG had all the tools they needed to actually go and run at an engage poke comp, and then it was over for them.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.